Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's event. I am Willie Santiago, the Manager of Programs and Resources for APAP. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a fair-skinned Hispanic person with brown eyes, medium-length wavy brown hair, and I am wearing a lavender shirt with a gray cardigan. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that APAP is located in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., on the ancestral lands of the Piscataway, Anacostan, and Pamunkey people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. I would like to pay my respect to the elders, both past, present, and future. Closed captioning is available for today's event. If you wish to turn on captioning, click Show Captions at the bottom of the Zoom window. We are also joined by ASL interpreters from Purple, Avery Cox, and Caitlin Brumbaugh. Apologies. Thank you for your continued partnership. We are happy to have you here today. If at all during today's session, if you need accommodations, please direct message me in the chat and I will do my best to assist you. APAP is your go-to resource for the connections and resources you need to build your career as a performing arts professional in the presenting, booking, and touring field. Join APAP as we continue to provide opportunities for community, learning, commerce, and discovery. If you have questions, you can always visit apap365.org/membership. And for further information, you can contact info@apap365.org. We are excited to be hosting a series of affinity groups this fall. Affinity groups are a way to connect with people in the same identity or profession as you. And while we encourage allyship within our membership, these spaces are meant solely for those who identify with this specific group. For our affinity groups, an APAP membership is required. So if you have questions about membership, you can always reach out to us at info@apap365.org. We also have upcoming programming. The final installment of our Welcome to the Field series will happen on November 16th. And then we have the Real Talk in Real Time Listening Lounge event on December 6th. It is an opportunity for you to ask us questions about our upcoming conference. For further information about programming, you can visit apap365.org/programs. Now, we are joined today by our wonderful hosts and speakers. Our host for this afternoon is James Lemons, who is the Executive Director for the Lake Placid Center of the Arts, and Bobby Asher, who is a performing arts consultant that serves in presenting organizations around the U.S., focusing on interim and artistic executive leadership. We are also joined today by speakers Shelly Kiala, who is the Executive Director for the International Festival of the Arts, Nicole Taney, who is the Artistic Director of the Celebrity Series of Boston and was previously the Director of Artistic Planning and Operations for the Spoleto Festival. We are also joined by Pam Green, who is the founder of PMG Arts Management, who provides booking and management and consulting services to performing artists and companies throughout the country. And lastly, we are joined by Diana Tan, who is the new booking manager for the National Geographic Society, who handles tours for the Nat Geo Live and Speakers Bureau program. Diana is also the conference co-chair for the APAP 2024 conference. I will now turn things over to your hosts, James and Bobby's. Thank you both so much. We are very excited to have you all here.
Thank you, Willie. My name is Bobby Asher. I use he, him pronouns. I am coming to you from Durham, North Carolina, which is the ancestral home of the Lumbee, Catawba, and Shakori tribes. And I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. And we give honor to the ancestors who had this land before we were here. I am a white man with a beard and sort of tortoiseshell glasses. I'm sitting in front of a bookcase with a bunch of, my wife says, too many vinyl records and a record player. And very happy to be here and happy to introduce my co-host, James Lemon. James, will you say hello?
Thanks, Bobby. Hello, my name is James Lemons. I'm the Executive Director of the Lake Placid Center for the Arts in far upstate New York. If you're driving north and you hit Canada, you've gone about 30 minutes too far, so turn around and come back and visit us. Here in Lake Placid, we are on the ancestral homes of the Akwesasne, and we pay respect and honor those ancestors past, present, and future. I am a light-skinned white guy with brown hair that is going grayer by the hour, it feels like, in a blue sweater in front of a bookshelf with books that I admittedly have not all read. Bobby, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you, James. So we want to get to know you, and I think there's enough of us here that if we did person by person intros, that would take up all of the time that we have today. So what we'd ask for you to do is to use the chat function, put your name, your organization, and what you hope to learn in this session. Also added to that, if you could just put whether or not if you're planning to come to the Association of Performing Arts Professionals conference in January, and if it's your first time. We'd love to hear from you about whether this is your first time coming up. The conference is something I've gone to now. I think I'm coming up on my 18th or 19th year of going to New York in January and having such an amazing time in the coldness and the darkness coming from wherever I am. But it is really an extraordinary experience. APAP is not the only conference in the world, but it's certainly one of the largest, and it's an important part of our industry here in the United States. It gives us all a chance to connect and do our work in a very concentrated way, and we're going to talk about today how to get the most from that experience, starting from when you decide to go, before you get there, while you're there, and hopefully afterwards as well. So hope you'll get what you need from this session, and please feel free as the session progresses to ask questions in the chat. We're going to have a section with our extraordinary panelists, all of who are seasoned pros at attending APAP in various contexts and conferences in general, and will help answer those questions. So you can start putting those questions in the chat if they come up during the conversation. First of all, just to set some context, we want to ask, why do we go to conference? What's important about this? What's important about going to New York in January when it's admittedly very cold and often dark, and meeting up with your colleagues? And so a few of the reasons, obviously most importantly, is to plan performance projects and schedule performances. This is the place where the ongoing arc of programming that happens in performing arts venues and festivals around the country usually either culminates or is an important part of the continuation of those conversations that leads to season announcements and confirmed shows for the following year. So that's one of the main reasons why folks decide to go to New York, to see new work, to make decisions about that work and how it connects with their community, and to make the financial and logistical arrangements for that project to be a part of your season or your festival. The other equally, I would say, important reason that we all come together in New York in January and around the country is to network with our colleagues. You will find a cross-section of every single type of performing arts organization that you can imagine represented in the attendance at APAP, and of course in APAP's membership. So it's an extraordinary opportunity to have conversations, to hear how other folks are doing important work, and maybe steal or borrow some of those ideas and take them back to your community, or also learn new colleagues and build those relationships, those networks. We just had our first session to talk about presenting last week, and one of the things we said was that the network that you build is one of the most important things. The people that you meet at these conferences, you will see for many, many conferences in years to come. Some people will retire, new people will come on, but it is really an unbroken line of people giving each other hugs around the giant statue in the Hilton lobby every January. That is the core of our business. So it's really about networking and relationships. Discussing best practices and new ideas. Obviously, ours is an evolving field. Certainly in the past few years, it's evolved, but throughout its history, we've been evolving. We've been finding new ways to connect artists and audience, and in more meaningful ways to connect artists and audiences. And a lot of that evolution, how that information is discussed and disseminated, happens at APAP. There's, in addition to, of course, showcases and meetings, there's an extraordinary list of every conceivable professional development possibility that you would want to explore that is part of the conference. And those are the sessions where we talk through the hard problems that we're all facing. We find the best ways to do our work and really, move the evolution of our field forward, and professionally developed in ourselves, and learn new ways to do things. And then, of course, we get to see work that isn't easily accessible in our local community. So if in presenting, you are primarily, or as a large part of your presentations, presenting artists that are from somewhere that is geographically different than the place where your organization exists, oftentimes you will see that work by going somewhere else to see it, and conferences are an important way to do that. We'll talk a little later in the session about showcases and context, especially around New York in January, and how to see work there. But it's an important place to be able to get, in some cases, full performances by artists that you're interested in or that you may not know before, but also tiny sort of tasting menus of things that happen throughout the conference as well, where you can see short snippets of artists and have a little bit more context for your decision, and how audiences respond, and how those artists may fit in your community. So that's some of the reasons why we get together in January. And for just a moment, we'd love to have, I think if Krista hasn't joined us, we'll have Willie just give a very brief overview of the history of the Association of Performing Arts Professionals Conference, how it got started, and how it's developed over the years. Willie, would you take it away?
Thank you for that, Bobby. So I'm going to give you just a very brief overview of how APAP came to be. During the 50s, there was a growing number of university concert managers and presenters where this role was starting to grow. So during 1957, a group of people got together to form what was called the Association of College and University Concert Managers, also known as the APAP. And then during the late 60s and early 70s, as the presenting field was beginning to expand beyond just universities, many other presenters started to join our membership. And eventually, in recognition of what that change was, we expanded the name to be the Association of College and University and Community Arts Administrators, in recognition of the various different roles that were beginning to crop up during the 70s in this time period. Moving forward, in 1988, our association changed its name to the Association of Performing Arts Presenters, which is a name that may be more familiar to those who have been involved with APAP for maybe the last 15 years or so. Our membership at this point was starting to expand beyond the United States and including Canada. And currently, our organization encompasses different types of presenting organizations, regional, state, local arts agencies. During the 80s, in conjunction with the Values and Life Studies system, the organization began to encourage our members to take a more proactive role in community life beyond just bringing artists to the stage. And towards the end of the 80s, the other change occurred where we still were committed to helping members develop sound business practices, and the association devoted greater attention to artistic and philosophical concerns. Arts presenters eventually became financially solvent, and in 1988, we underwent our first formal long-range planning process. As a part of that process, we moved our headquarters from Madison, Wisconsin to Washington, D.C. And so in terms of how we're moving from where we used to be serving primarily college and university presenters, we then shifted our identity to be the Association of Performing Arts Professionals in recognition of the various roles that this community has. We're not just presenters and agents, it's also presenters, it's agents, it's artists, it's producers, and different types of arts administrators of varying kinds, those who fall into the realm of marketing or development or production. So we changed our name in recognition of that entire ecosystem that revolves around the performing arts sector. In terms of what APAP is, it is one of the largest booking conferences for the performing arts sector. It's an opportunity for all of you to gather and network with your peers, as well as to discover new art and make connections within the field to fill out what your season looks like and be able to advocate for yourself as an agent, the artist you represent, as well as yourself as a presenter, and trying to bring your artistic vision to life. At APAP, when you're here at the conference, there's an opportunity to see hundreds of showcases all throughout New York City. It is not just an event that happens solely within the Hilton Hotel. There are showcases happening all throughout the city in various venues, encompassing multiple genres, from classical music to theater to cirque to magic. You'll find jugglers and so much more at these conferences. So you'll have the opportunity to see a wide array of art in such a short period of time. We'll also have a series of networking events where you can have opportunities to meet people doing similar work as you. We are launching our first program called Just So, Socially Engaged Works. It's an opportunity to have roundtable discussions with people who are doing socially engaged work that may be in alignment with what you are either presenting or currently working on. As a part of this, we also have an Up Next pitch session where it's a opportunity for new and upcoming work to be pitched to our general membership and for presenters who are looking to fill out their season. Our conference, we offer a variety of different programs, professional development sessions, networking opportunities. It's an incredible way for you as arts professionals to gather and to be able to experience what we are able to offer in New York City. So thank you, Bobby and James, for offering me this opportunity. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me at programs@apap365.org. I'll make sure I put that in the chat below, as well as info@apap365.org. Thank you again, Bobby and James.
So we recognize that as a part of the festival, part of the conference, and in looking at the chat, we see a lot of first timers, a lot of second timers, a lot of people who may be attending the conference. Saying festival today, I mean conference. The conference today in a new capacity. We want to extend a very special welcome to those of you who are looking forward to your first full experience at APAP. We're happy that you're joining our conference community, and we look forward to having Bobby buy you a drink in the lobby or the Hilton Bar, where a lot of work takes place after hours. Just track him down. He has a consultant card, a credit card these days, and we'll be happy to buy you a drink. I'm going to pay for that statement a little later.
You certainly.
Yeah, I will. I recognize that. Conference in a lot of ways is a little bit of a choose your own adventure. And today we want to kind of go through a couple of different paths of which choices you might make in order to have the most successful and fulfilling conference possible. Part of the thinking, and this is kind of the part of the participatory section of today's session, which is really thinking about what are the top takeaway or the top 2 takeaways you want to have accomplished when your conference experience is over. Really, we find it's really important to think a little bit about what you hope to leave with at the end of 4 or 5 or 6 days in the city, what you're taking back to your organization, either having have learned or have booked or accomplished, so that you can really pick a path that properly gets you towards that goal. So I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to throw up a chart that will where we can go in and highlight and ask you to contribute to this chart to really think about what your APAP goals might be for APAP 2024. So forgive me while I talk. I'm going to do a little share screen. And Bobby, maybe we'll ask you to start us with what your APAP goal is for 2024. And then we'll ask those of you on the call either to put it in the chat or to unmute yourself briefly and throw out a goal so that we can kind of cater our advice throughout the session to make sure that we're really giving solid how-tos from our experience in each of these categories. So Bobby, I'm going to throw it to you to say, what is one of your goals for APAP 2024?
Sure. One of my goals is to reconnect with as many different members of my network as possible. And James, I'll monitor the chat for you. Just throw your goals in the chat or unmute and speak out. Don't everybody go at once. I would also say that our panelists can participate in this as well if y'all want to throw out any goals that you have. Mark Phillips wants to introduce his show to as many appropriate presenters as possible without being obnoxious. Mark, thank you for that goal and the detail that went into it. That's a very important important approach. Thanks for that.
And I'm going to assume, Mark, that you are an artist.
Yep. Pam would like to discover new artists to book. Pam, have you met Mark? This is not the marketplace yet, but who else?
Who else?
Shelley. Shelley would like to see work in a variety of venues with live audiences. Yes. It's so important to see how audiences respond. Eric Davidson says, would love to network with others who work in newer arts centers, are affiliated with schools, to see how they are building audiences and building seasons. Do you want me to slow down, James? You're doing well.
Thanks.
Felicia would like to introduce a musician that she's helping to find appropriate places for his brand of music, which is spiritual music. Marianne wants to promote her artist who's appearing in the Yipka showcase at Weil Hall. We'll talk about Yipka in just a little bit, Marianne. So glad to hear that. Diana wants to meet at least 10 new colleagues that you've never worked with before, and also reconnect with colleagues to learn how things are going and to wrap up booking conversations that started at the fall regional conferences. Yes. Pam is supporting Lotus and the dance company Ronald K. Brown and Evidence in marketing via showcases and meetings, and to test some diversified offerings that they hope to provide. Andrew wants to connect with other marketing folks and commiserate about our challenges and celebrate our accomplishments together. Yes, it's important to thanks for that, to recognize that it's not just programmers that come to APAP. There are people in fundraising and marketing and production and all the other incredibly important roles that we have as presenters. So happy to hear that our marketing folks will be there. Connect with venues, presenting a showcase.
Do we have any
coming in so quickly?
Do we have any, Bobby, do we have any artists? Perhaps we only have one or two from artists and presenting staff.
Aubrey wants to learn more about the presenting field and advocate for educational programming at her organization. Rena wants to build a successful season that doesn't break the budget. I like that. That should be everybody's goal, hopefully. Chris is an agent that wants to network and have their requested meetings be answered and yield productive results. Definitely. Renee is here. She's an artist. These are great.
Perfect. So I think we have a good cross section here, and so as you can see, the takeaways that people who come to conference have are as varied as the type of people that come to conference. So we have programmers, agents, presenting staff, and artists, all with individual, very personalized hopes for conference, and how we go about really identifying a path forward to accomplish these goals will be as individualized and customized as every person. What I'm hoping to accomplish at conference may be similar, or it may be vastly different than what Bobby is hoping to accomplish, because the organizations that I'm working for or working with may be similar or vastly different from those that are in Bobby's portfolio. So as we go into conference and really begin to prepare for our conference experience, it's important to really, we think through those goals and think through strategies and tactics that you can use to accomplish those goals. I'll be honest, this will be my 10th APAP conference. My first 2 years at conference, I had no plan going into conference. I showed up at the Hilton. I'm from upstate New York, so I took my coat off because it was warmer down there than it was where I was coming from. And I all of a sudden at that point got the giant thick booklet of because they used to print everything for you, the schedules, the giant thick booklet of conference materials, went to the hotel room and cried silently in the corner because I didn't know what to do next. Because I didn't know that I really, to have the most successful conference, a little pre-planning and a little work on my part makes the entire experience easier. So as we kind of go through today's session, we'll customize some of our conversations around some of the goals that you've shared with us so that we can, hopefully by the end of our session, much like we all do when we will be planning for our end of our conference, we'll kind of give some key hints, some perhaps some suggested paths to choose for you on your choose your own adventure so that we can really get an idea of where you're going from. We will also state that as we talk about strategy, as we talk about preparation, you can totally show up at conference like I did the first 2 years, have a fantastic conference without doing minimal prep. And have a great time, meet some great people, book some shows. But we think that, your organization is making an investment both in time and energy in really running around the city for 4 days. So whether you're an artist or whether you're staff or whether you're an agent or a programmer, we really think that you can maximize your productivity, really maximize your the feeling of success you have at the end of the conference with just a little bit of pre-planning to really make the most of that situation. So, Bobby, I think that at this point we should probably begin to talk about some ways to really accomplish those goals, which is through professional development, training sessions and affinity groups and networking. So I'm going to pivot back over to you to begin that conversation. Yep. And I'll keep our goals up so we can track them during the meeting today.
Thanks. Willie's going to join us again and talk specifically about professional development. One of the things that you can do to prepare in advance is go on the APAP website and read the list of extraordinary professional development opportunities and affinity groups and pre-register for some of those. So Willie's going to give a brief overview of that for us now. Willie.
Thank you, Bobby. So yes, as Bobby mentioned, in preparation for conference, we offer a series of affinity groups. I did mention those earlier at the top of our call. To see the complete list again, you can go to apap365.org/programs. We offer a series of affinity groups as a way for you to meet your people before you get to New York City. So we offer them both by identity as well as by role in the field. So by connecting with folks prior to the conference, it gives you the opportunity to meet your folks. So this way, when you get to New York City, you have a little bit firmer standing. So you know what your conference goals are. You already have some connections with people that you can maybe meet face to face to do business, or just to be able to connect with people who are very similar to you. In November, we will be announcing within the next week or so a series of networking sessions that will be specifically about how to network at conference, as well as we'll have 1 or 2 events that are maybe more specific by genre. So please look out for the APAP emails that we send out because it'll have all the information on what our networking November events will look like. Now, when you do get to our conference in New York City, we continue to have forums and affinity groups available, both by role and by profession. Again, once you get here, it's an opportunity to meet a variety of new people in a very short amount of time. Majority of our affinity groups, they do happen on Friday morning and afternoon. On Friday, during our pre-conference period, it is open to attend. After the opening plenary has begun at 5 o'clock, at that point, it becomes a members only conference and you have to be registered in order to attend. So if you are in the New York City area, you can connect with our local affinity groups and forums to try to establish what those connections are. Attending these in advance also helps inform the work that you're going to be doing once everything starts after the opening plenary, when the expo hall is open and you start having your meetings. A lot of people, as both Bobby and James mentioned, they have different goals at APAP, and there are many ways to APAP. Some people will arrive with their schedule already completely filled out. Some people will oftentimes leave gaps in their schedule so that they can discover new work, discover new colleagues, and connect with people in the field. There isn't necessarily any right or wrong way to do it. It all aligns with what your conference goals are specifically. You can find our advanced program on our website, apap365.org. It has the comprehensive list of all of our sessions, what our schedule looks like, as well as a page that has a variety of videos on how people APAP. Specifically, we have a video that was submitted by Diana Tan, who is on this call, as well as our other conference co-chair, Andrea Cuevas, who is attending today. So if you want to see those videos, you can access them within our advanced program. Now, in terms of professional development, we offer a series of events that focus on a variety of topics. This year, we're going to be tackling future of labor in terms of looking at trends and issues and what we see coming up on the horizon. Arts compensation has been a huge topic for us in the field right now. We are currently in the middle of the Arts Compensation Project. We are gathering information from various presenting organizations in terms of what their salaries are for the various roles they have. So all of this data is anonymously presented, and it is then aggregated into a portal online. For those who pay for their subscription, they'll be able to access this data in real time. We'll also be presenting more of that data at our conference this year. We'll be also looking at what the future of our field looks like, discussing what is going to be the impact of AI. We'll be looking at new data on audience participation, as well as trying to take a look at how community engagement is being redefined and why it's critical to start making shifts. We will also continue this conversation we took up earlier in the year about visas and best practices around contracting. And we'll also be taking a look at the realities of what block booking offers. There are other opportunities for discovery. I mentioned our Up Next series, which is a artist pitch session for new artists to be able to pitch their work to our membership. That is a curated session. We have our artists already selected, and we're very excited. We'll be announcing who those are throughout our social media over the next couple of weeks. We also offer 5 minutes to shine. The application period for that is still open. It's an opportunity to share your innovations with the field. We select about 4 or 5 people for that to be able to present their innovations during our opening plenaries, during the plenary sessions that we have. Our plenary sessions, they are a moment where everybody can gather, where we don't really have much scheduled against it. They're huge learning opportunities for arts administrators and professionals throughout the field to be able to learn around a specific topic. Other opportunities for discovery. This year, we are launching our Works in Progress session. It is very similar to Up Next, except these are works that aren't quite tour ready yet. These are works that are still in development and still in the early phases of being able to be tour ready. So it's a chance to get to look at what is the upcoming work and what is still needing to be worked out. So it'll be a chance to meet artists who will be doing work you might be interested, maybe not necessarily the coming touring cycle, but maybe within 1 or 2 years, depending on where they are in their planning process. We also have our MLK Day Mentor in a Moment. It's a chance for intergenerational exchange that you can sign up for. The deadline for that is on December 4th, as well as for participating in the Works in Progress section. The deadline for that is on November 17th. And so these professional development sessions, we encourage you to attend as much as you can. We work towards trying to schedule them when there's not as much going on so that we don't have too many conflicting events or too much up against what the expo hall is, so that we have an opportunity for both artists and agents and presenters to be able to gather and learn together. And these sessions are also a great way for discovery, not just in terms of the presenters that are going to be on these panels, but they're also an opportunity for you to connect with people who are attending these events. You might be sitting at a table with somebody who maybe they ask a really great question to the panel, and you might have that opportunity to talk with them afterwards further about what they asked, and they might be doing similar work. Or you might be struck by something that someone says in another panel discussion, and it gives you the opportunity to talk with them. these opportunities to connect with other professionals during these learning sessions, as it provides a slightly more informal way to connect because you don't necessarily have a fixed meeting. It's a little bit more, you're in a learning environment where you're able to discuss more openly than necessarily doing a direct pitch at a meeting that you might have. So these learning opportunities are a great way to learn more about the field, as well as to connect with your colleagues from around the country. That's one of the amazing things about this conference, is that we're able to offer you a wide swath of opportunities, from professional development, networking, learning, as well as the opportunities to connect. So I will now turn things back over to Bobby and James. Thank you.
Thanks, Willie. Some of the most square footage at the conference, both in the physical Hilton itself and in your email as we lead up into conference, will be requests for meetings, places for meetings, places for agents, managers, and artists to meet with presenters through meetings, whether those are sometimes virtual, many of them are in person, either in the expo hall or in the Hilton itself. We wanted to give a little practical advice about agent meetings and some of the best tips and techniques to make them as effective as possible, but also not overwhelm either the agents, artists, or the presenters. And I think this is a good chance for some practical advice from our Q&A earlier. And Bobby, I will ask you from our agent category here, agents and managers, for some practical advice on ways to discover new artists, or for agents to introduce their artist roster to presenters. Any practical advice that comes to mind before we talk about meetings?
Absolutely. I would say the first bit of advice is that folks who are there, who are bringing artists to hopefully be scheduled and presenters in institutions around the country, have a responsibility along with the presenter to ensure that they're connecting with the folks that need to see the very specific type of work that they are bringing. So we talked a little bit about this last week, about the power imbalance, that perceived power imbalance, because we have in many cases large institutions, or slightly larger institutions in many cases, that are nonprofit institutions that are making choices, or the buyers, I guess, in a very sort of basic way to put it. And then we have booking agents who are often, in many cases, individually run small businesses who are bringing the artist's work to be presented to these folks. So maybe on the seller's side, to put it in very crass terms. And so it's important, talking about your network, to really build a level of respect around how important the agent manager role is in this ecosystem. It is incredibly important, and the work that we do would not be possible without these folks. So it's important to treat all those folks with respect, to do as much as you can to be hearing and to seeing as much work as you can. But also, somebody's unmuted there somewhere, but also we recognize that you may have not unlimited time when you're at APAP, correct? So how do you navigate that? The first thing I would say is, on the booking agent side, if you're bringing artists to APAP, one of the ways that you can get the most responsiveness is to look at the website of the organization that you're hoping to meet with. Look at the person who's responsible for programming, call that person by name in their email if and when you can, and also look at what they've presented, either in the season that they have up or the festival that they have up, and ask yourself,
I'm sorry, Bobby, it's hard to hear you over that conversation. Sure. Can whoever that is please mute it so that so we can hear Bobby?
Thank you, Pam. I'm trying to. Okay, I think that did it. So I think that's an important thing, is to be specific about the work and the organization. If you have, for example, a circus act that you want to pitch to presenters, and you look at the past 2 years of programming, there aren't any circus acts, maybe that's not your highest priority to make contact with that presenter. On the presenting side, I think we have a responsibility to look beyond the agents and managers that we always meet with. Certainly there's a group of core folks that you'll wind up working with year after year, but to look beyond that group and look at the artists as quickly as possible in the materials that are sent and make decisions about spending a percentage of your time exploring beyond your traditional programming aesthetic. So you find a balance where these presenters are looking to, obviously book a season. They know their missions. They're trying to find the work that speaks to those missions, but also looking beyond that and trying to discover something new. And then you have agents and managers who are looking to focus particularly on the institutions that are most likely to present the work that they have, and then also kind of push beyond that and find other people to build those rosters. So I think that's a way that you can maximize your time and also get out of your silo, so to speak. The other quick tip I'll give, this is very quick, is I don't know if I can actually do this, but I'm putting an Amazon link in the chat. These are reporters' notebooks. I've used these notebooks at APAP for probably the last decade. They are long and skinny, so they fit in a coat pocket, either your winter coat or in a coat or in a purse. And it's the best way that I've found to keep notes throughout the conference. You may want to do it on your phone digitally, but I would say to the best of your ability, keep a running list. It can look like shorthand to everybody else in your life. It can be unreadable, but keep a running list of things and a way for you to remember actions you want to take from the connections you had, responses to how you felt about a showcase that you saw, a particular person that you ran into that you want to talk to about a job or a new initiative. Any number of those things, and particularly in meetings where you're speaking with a booking agent manager about artists, sometimes multiple artists, you may be writing down avails, fee quotes, all of those things. So I would say find a mechanism by which you can capture that information and access it later. Sometimes it may take some interpretation of your own handwriting if you're like me, but it's important to have a mechanism for capturing information as you sort of zip from place to place. So we're going to move on and talk very quickly about showcases and performances. So obviously, one of the most important things we're there to do is to see performances. How do you do that? How do you survive that? How do you get the most out of it? And I'll just talk about how I've done it and go from there. And I think if any of our panelists want to jump in and put anything in the chat, please feel free, although we're going to have some time to talk to you all in just a bit. So the most important thing to realize, James, if you want to share your screen, is that APAP is the sort of molten core of a very large arts ecosystem that has built up, that happens every January in New York City. So it's the APAP conference is at sort of the middle of that, but then there are other things that have built up around the APAP conference that are there because of the concentrations that people that work in our industry that are gathered there in that place at that time. So, of course, at APAP, we have the Young Concert Performing Artists, which is I believe the only APAP sponsored showcase that presents up-and-coming classical artists through an audition process that happens at Weill Hall every year. A really great place to see young classical artists. There's the Up Next, the Work in Progress tour that the Work in Progress works that Willie mentioned. So there are places within APAP where you can see work. And then there are festivals and other conferences that come around it. So, for example, you may have seen some news about the Public Theater and Under the Radar, which was a theater-specific festival that happens during the time that APAP happens. It's coming back this year under the auspices of Archetype Productions. There's also an opera festival called the Prototype Festival. the extraordinary Global Fest, which is international artists from around the world performing in a one-night festival, but also with a associated mini conference called Wavelengths. So Global Fest is important. Winter Jazz Fest is another incredible sort of two-night marathon that happens during APAP that has extraordinary jazz and improvisational music focused artists that happen mostly throughout jazz clubs in the Village in Brooklyn. You can get some really good pizza and sort of stumble from venue to venue and see amazing artists in really intimate spaces, and it can be really fun, and it's really a place of discovery as well. It's really a sort of state of the jazz world that happens every year, and really if you program jazz or if you want to hear some great jazz, that's a great place to do it. Then we also have conferences that are happening sort of around the same time. ISPA, International Society for Performing Arts, they have a convening every year. Is it every year or every other year? I think, Shelley, you're on the board there.
Every year.
Every year in New York, and then somewhere else internationally. They're another professional organization that's internationally focused rather than just being about the United States. Their conference this year, I believe, is before APAP. Sometimes it's before and sometimes it's after, but I think this year it's before. Is that right?
10th through the 12th.
So the ISPA conference. There's also Chamber Music America, which is obviously focused on chamber music and happens at a similar time. It's usually a little bit separate date-wise from APAP. There's the American Dance Platform, which I believe is still operating, and we also have that's at the Joyce Theater, incredible dance to see there. And then we also have a bunch of international convenings. So the Japan Society is an incredible organization in New York that presents work artists from Japan or relating to issues from Asia. Nordic convening, the Quebec convening, a lot of great Cirque artists and other contemporary artists from Quebec. And if I recall, a pretty terrific cocktail party that they have every year as well. So what I would say is look at the APAP website as the beginning of your planning process, but then make sure you're reading these other emails and researching these other opportunities so that your calendar can kind of be accessorized by these other incredible things that have built off of the core of APAP. So that's generally called Jan Arts NYC. The website that James has up on the screen now is sort of their list of that, and that's a great resource to go to review and see those opportunities and take advantage of those as well. I would say if you're not from New York City or you haven't lived there, spent a lot of time there, one perhaps challenge that I had early in the time when I was going to APAP was realizing that I couldn't see a showcase in Midtown Manhattan and then see a jazz artist in Greenpoint, Brooklyn 15 minutes later. So one thing to do that's very important is to prioritize things, and then also make sure that you're looking at either a subway map or if you're using taxis or Curb. Typically, the APAP stuff is very concentrated around the Hilton in most cases, but if you're going out to these other things, to make sure that you've built in travel time into that. It's not as close as you think in many cases. So think about that. Also, I'd encourage you not to go to a showcase in Brooklyn if there's about 6 inches of snow and no taxis to get back to Manhattan, because I did that once and there was a lot of trudging through the snow that happened. So that's important. Make sure you have a good, internet connection. I always try to have an extra phone battery because I usually can't get back to the room to recharge my phone. But travel as light as possible so that you have your notebook and your phone and your vitamin C or whatever it is that you carry, water bottle, but not be carrying a lot of stuff, because the chances often to go back to your room are minimal, at least if you're putting a significant schedule together.
Bobby, if I could jump in just
Sure.
for 2 secs. If you are unfamiliar with the city, or this will be one of your first times using public transportation, electronic media on your smartphone is really fantastic. The app Move It, MOOVIT, you can type in where you're headed and it will give you public transportation directions to like walk 10 feet to your left. That specific. It's no charge, it's free to use. In Manhattan, when I was learning the city for the first couple of trips, it was my invaluable resource to know where I'm going and to also plan that. So really, whatever technology on your smartphone you can use to make your life easier when you're there is really valuable.
Thank you, James. I would also say, I think most of the turnstiles in New York now work with Apple Pay or smartphone pay, which makes things enormously easier. I believe that's true that most of them do now. So look into that. And also, if you're using cabs, the Curb app is the app you can use to pay digitally and also sometimes summon a cab. Cabs in New York are great. They're very efficient way to get around, but obviously at a higher cost. So be thinking about that. Excellent. So just to talk briefly about tickets, there are some performances that happen as part of APAP that are paid performances that are happening in the city with audiences that are not APAP specific. So your APAP badge often will, as for all the APAP showcases and those events, get you into those because you've registered for the conference. If you're going to some of these other things that are a little farther outside, oftentimes it'll say on the invitation, just wear your APAP badge. Anybody with an APAP badge gets in free. In some cases, in the case of Global Fest and Winter Jazz Fest, everybody's sort of going, the ticket price is the way that those incredible organizations are supported. So buying a ticket, either a marathon ticket to one night or both nights, or in the case of Winter Jazz Fest, is important. You may also be, there may also be an artist manager, booking agent who wants you to see a performance very specifically that may be a paid performance and may get you on the list or get you complimentary tickets to see that performance. I would say the best advice I have, and it's advice that I have not always followed as well as I should, as some of the booking agents may tell you on this conversation, is to not ask for those at the last minute, to be mindful of making sure that you understand that most of those booking agents have a limited number of those. So be a good citizen and a good neighbor, but also, don't be afraid to ask, because often, if you're very interested in the artist or it's important for you to see them, it's in the agent's best interest to make arrangements. And oftentimes they've planned for that. So be sure and ask. And if you know it's limited, often making sure that you're there or letting them know if you can't be there, so you're not unnecessarily taking up a space that someone else could use, is important as well. But certainly with Winter Jazz Fest, with Global Fest, and I think with most of the prototype festival things and under the radar, there's a ticket purchase involved, and unless you've had a specific conversation with the agent for that artist that's performing. So think about that. It's important to see as much as you can, and that's a good way to do it.
Bobby, just to lift up a couple of practical tips on my end in that regard. Especially if you're offsite, if you're at one of the festivals, remember that the personnel that is running the front of house and the production team are often from the venue, not necessarily from the agent. So, they are reliant upon our agent friends to make sure the list is accurate. If you're not on the list, please be respectful of those people who are really trying to run a festival that in their own venue that is both presenters and paid general public, and that they rely on for their support. So, graciousness and patience is a virtue that will get you far. Also, take some time to peruse that schedule of showcases, of other convenings in the city before you arrive, just to see if there's anything that you desperately have to, need to, can't live without seeing, and do your work in advance to make sure that you're going to be able to have a ticket to the show. If you arrive the day of and all of a sudden discover that there's something that you have to see and it's last minute, you just physically may not be able to get a seat to that venue. So really, even a quick perusal that takes 15 minutes to go through the schedule, just to circle the things that you desperately know that I have to see these before I leave, well in advance, I know is appreciated by venues, and it's appreciated by our agent manager friends and by our artists, to make sure that you are you as a presenter or you as an attendee can really get in and do that work that's valuable. A little pre-thought will actually go a long way to help you have the best experience possible.
James, you want to introduce our guests, all of whom have great experience in conferences and are going to share their wisdom with us?
Perfect. Bobby, happy to. Just a reminder for everyone who our guests are today, we are so thrilled that they were able to carve out time to join us. All of them have really extremely valuable insights for their festival conference experience today. So we are thrilled to welcome Pam Green, founder and president of PMG Arts Management, Diana Tan, booking manager for the National Geographic Society, Nicole Taney, artistic director of the Celebrity Series of Boston, Shelley Kiala, executive director of the International Festival of Arts and Ideas in New Haven. And they all have so much more that I'm not going to take up time to list all of their accolades, because we would be here the rest of the session. But thank you all for joining us. I'm going to just let you jump in, but I'm going to feed you a question, which is, what is the most important lesson you learned during your very first APAP conference, whether that was 2 years ago or 20 years ago? And just perhaps, Pam, if you want to kick us off, and we'll let everyone else kind of feed in from there.
Oh my God. First of all, I happily turned 60 years old in March, and my first APAP conference was a really long time ago. So I'm going to share some wisdom. I don't know if I even remember the first one, to be really honest with you. Hey, Shelley. Hey, Diana. Hey, Nicole. Nice to see you all, and Ollie, and same to you. And hello to everybody out there in Zoom land. When Bobby posted that link, I thought it was going to be to some vitamin C. You guys, that is the most important thing to bring to APAP. I'm sorry. Vitamin C, load up, put it in your bag, stick it in your pockets, everywhere, because it's a big germ love fest. Really, it is. Even before COVID, we all came home sick as dogs, because that's just how it is, because we are a very handsy, lovey kind of field, as you guys know. So I think that is. The other thing I would say, I mean, if I was just going to give another tip, is I find that, and some of you guys are new, so maybe this doesn't matter, but if you're friends or connected to some of your colleagues online in any kind of way, I would take down the amount of personal stuff that you put up. I have found that when I have a lot of professional colleagues that are my friends on Facebook. And if I start talking about everything that happens with my kids and Christmas and blah, 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 when I got to the conference, they were like, yeah, I saw that on Facebook. And small talk is really a lot about our business, how you doing, et cetera, getting to know one another. So I would just, that's really a suggestion that I make, that you maybe save just a little bit of something to talk about for when you actually get there, and not necessarily just kind of put everything out there beforehand. Now, if it's stuff about your what you're doing, your showcases and all that, I think that's one thing. But for the most part, I think for those of you who maybe are not necessarily completely new, or even for those of you who are new, people like to get to know each other. So save a little bit of that personal, kind of stuff for the actual conference in-person conversations, because I have to say, some things get kind of killed if you don't. So I'll stop there. I have more to advise, but that's one thing. Two tidbits. I got a couple more.
Thanks, Pam. And as we get into everyone else, just a note that if you have questions for our panel, we will have some Q&A time. So please put those in the chat. Bobby and I will manage that chat and pepper those questions in. So I'll let whoever wants to jump in next. Shelley, I see you unmuted, so we'll go with you.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Great to see everyone. I'm Shelley Kiala. I use she, her pronouns. I, had a list of things, like a long list of answers to this question, and y'all have like checked them off as we've gone through. So the biggest piece of advice I can say is listen to everything that was said on this call. It is so true. Every single piece. I just ordered one of those notebooks, Bobby, a 3-pack. So I'm excited about that. But I'm somebody who really likes to be present. And so it's difficult for me to get into conferences where I have to be thinking 20 minutes ahead, an hour ahead, 5 hours ahead. So even though I do schedule, one of the strategies that I figured out after like my first or second APAP was to find a buddy that can complement my skill set, where I'll just be in a moment and get really excited about a conversation. And so I try to find somebody who's not like that can be my partner in crime as we go through the week and just really lean into their assets, and they can do the same for me. So I would say definitely find a buddy or a couple buddies. And then on the buddy front, it's not possible to hit everything. It just let that go. You will miss things you want to see. You will be late for things and then find out you can't possibly get a taxi to where you wanted to go or however you're trying to get there, even though you planned it all out in advance. So forgiving yourself, and then ask people that you trust who might be able to go to something that you didn't have a chance to see. If you can, lean into that network in that way as well, and not relieve that pressure off of yourself. I think those are really important lessons.
Thank you, Shelley. Nicole?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Nicole Taney here, using she, her pronouns. I would say, y'all covered, again, everything. I would add, make time to eat, because I tend to overschedule myself, and then I drop the ball all the time on the eating part. And my former colleagues at Splato would tease me all the time for not scheduling in time to take care of myself. So along with the vitamin C, hydration and feeding yourself is important too, whether you are eating with someone or just snatching a few minutes by yourself to like collect your thoughts. And yeah, I tend to schedule myself very far out, and very much I over program myself and run myself ragged for the 9 days that I'll be there, because I'm there for ISPA too. And it's great and it's exhausting, and then you come home and collapse.
Thank you, Nicole. And Diana, we'll throw it over to you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Well, one of my top tips, especially if you're scheduling meetings, is to put the time zone or the time in the meeting invite, because you have so many presenters from all over the country and internationally. When you're sending that initial invite, it might show up differently on their end. So I would say in the meeting title, make sure you're putting the time, like 1 p.m. EST Eastern, because we're all in New York, because that way it's going to cause a lot less confusion, especially for everyone's time zones, to keep it all straight and they know what time that they've scheduled it when it appears on their calendar. And another thing is, don't be afraid to fail. And what I mean by that is, don't feel like you have to have all the answers to everything. Sometimes that's when the most meaningful conversations happen. We're here to build relationships. So maybe, I know a lot of people tend to think like, I have to get into this like whole pitch session when you're talking at someone. They're going through so many meetings, meeting so many people. You want to make it memorable. You want to be relatable and hit some kind of connection points. So sometimes having questions where you're trying to find out what their goal, what they're trying to accomplish, and help them solve a problem is the best way to sell your artist, sell your roster, or to find something that is pertinent or relatable, evergreen to your community that you're looking to book and bring in. And lastly, I know I'm going through a whole lot of tips, but for a third tip is take advantage of the APAP programs, especially like ELI, leadership programs, 5 minutes to shine, or go to the sessions. A lot of times it's great to have meetings, but as an agent, I've been through that life where I've always been told book as many meetings, when I stepped outside of that and participated in some of these programs, I really built up relationships where I was able to bring in meaningful residencies. For instance, there was a time I sat in on a panel where one of the presenters talked about their work with the incarcerated. Well, now I work with a storyteller who also works with the incarcerated. And because I attended that session, I remembered this person does this kind of work and reached out to them, was able to pitch that and make those connections, that mission-driven connections to help reach out and make bigger impacts on communities, which I think we're all here for. So those are my 3 tips. I know I want a little bit more than one, but those are things that I wish I knew at my first conference.
Thank you so much, Diana. That's terrific. And we have a lot of time for plenty of tips. So we have plenty of time. So keep them coming. Just a quick question from the chat. This is from Thomas. If it's my first conference and I hope to make connections that lead to bookings, is buying a booth recommended, or is that something for future conferences? Is there maybe either Pam or Diana, if you wanted to take the lead on that question and talk about the pros and cons of booth for booking?
I have to say I've never been to a conference without a booth, so I'm not sure that I know an answer to that. I think it's ideal if you have, Thomas, I'm not sure if you're going to be there with more than one person. I do think a booth is helpful. I think that it gives people the way to find you, the way to, obviously display your wares, and it helps you with traffic. I think it's helpful if you can be a little bit strategic about where you are. We could talk about that more if you'd like to. But I would suggest if it's your first time to actually, a booth is probably going to be better than not having one. But if you have a second person with you that can also kind of be roaming and sort of doing those sort of, organic sort of meetings and bumping into folks in the lobby and the elevator and spaces and that kind of thing, I think that will probably serve you the best.
I would agree with that. And Willie, are exhibitors able to share booths again this year? Because it is an investment. So I can't remember that.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So it is an investment. So if you can pair up with someone that might have like products or complementary artists and productions, that would be great to help boost traffic. And like Pam said, I do think that it does help. I've never gone to a conference without a booth. And it's always been great, but I would also make sure you're looking at the attendee list that APAP sends out to see who might be a best fit. Like they list out the capacities and the genres that each of the presenters are representing or looking for. So I would really curate your list to make sure you're reaching out to presenters where it makes sense, or that are bringing in the types of artists or programs that you're looking to book.
Yeah, I was in a Zoom session. How are you? Good, thanks.
I would just say that there are some booking agents who don't reserve booths. The booths in the exhibit hall are there. There's also folks who just register for the conference but don't rent a booth and do meetings in the lobby, which is also a valid and a little more cost-effective way to do it. I would encourage you not register for the conference and then just come and try to get meetings without registering. I heard on one of these professional development conversations that called being a lobby goblin. So my professional advice would be don't be a lobby goblin. If you're coming to bring artists to the table, please register if at all possible. Another question from the chat. First of all, Courtney's looking for a buddy. Courtney, I hope you find your buddy. You need a conference buddy here. Lee asks, aside from SwapCard, what are some apps that you're using to manage meetings, et cetera, at the conference? Anybody from the panel want to take that question? Should we call on somebody? Oh, for some reason, our panelists can't unmute.
Try again.
We're back, Bobby.
There we go.
So just to follow up, since we're muted there, aside from swap card apps, any what apps do we use to manage meetings or make our lives easier?
I put everything in my Outlook calendar obsessively, like by increments. So I think that's my tool.
Yeah. Google
Yeah,
Calendar.
I use my Google.
I just have my calendar printed out in a folder. I mean, I know that's like so old school paper, but I hate just being always connected to my phone. It's always dying because you never can find a place to plug it in, etc. So I have my assistant just make me a really nice folder with my schedule all laid out. And if something changes, I can always take a pen and just mark it out. But I do use my phone, but I definitely always have my schedule in paper as well.
Question for Pam and Diana, and then a follow-up supplemental question for Shelley and Nicole there, which is from an agent manager perspective, how booked are you with appointments versus walk-ins? Which do you prefer? And Nicole and Shelley, after they're done, how much do you book appointments with have to have booking conversations in advance, or how many, or have you found there's a percentage of meetings to showcases that is most effective for you?
Yeah, so there have been years that I've booked myself to the hilt and did 15-minute meetings, and that's very hard. And almost every single time they will go overtime, or somebody's standing waiting to get in the booth, and there's that awkwardness of saying like, oh, can you get up now? My next meeting is here. So for me, I found in my process that it's better to schedule 30-minute meetings to have that extra time for someone to leave, for someone to get there in case somebody's late. And I also like to leave some open time for walk-ups or people that might not schedule meetings. If you have an additional person in the booth, that's great too, to help with walk-ups. The time that I was scheduling 15-minute meetings, I luckily had an associate with me, so she was able to take care of some of that overlap, or I would have definitely missed some. So for my personal experience, it's better to have some buffer in between meetings and go for those longer time slots than the 15-minute meetings.
Yeah, I would agree.
And also, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Calendly is a great link for pre-scheduling meetings, and it also takes care of that time zone thing, just circling back on apps. All right, I'm done now. I'm sorry, Pam.
No. It's good to hear. I tend to do 30 minutes just because I'm, a little bit chatty and kind of like to get into some depth as well sometimes in my conversations. I'm not saying that Diana doesn't, but I just, that 30 minutes seemed to always be the sweet spot for me. I tend to book myself like crazy because, you want to get, your money's worth out of the experience. So I definitely do a lot. I did start to sort of, as I got more into my career, I don't know, I've probably been at APAP like 25 times, but to try to do some meetings at like, Radiance Tea House, you guys. Now I'm giving you the and I think that one, it was out of business. I think it's back now, right? I think Radiance is back right around the corner. I don't know how I got through like 20 APAPs and never knew about it, but the last 5 years I finally discovered it, and it's a great place. It's a little tea house. It's around the corner from the Hilton. Don't tell everybody in the world because everybody, just put that in your phone. It's on 155th. But I do try to schedule some things as food meals so that, like you said, we can eat and have some tea and and get out of the booth every once in a while. Again, I've been blessed with I have had an assistant and I usually hire an intern to come with me so that if I do decide to take a meeting during booth time at Radiance, there's somebody there that at least kind of has the basics that can talk to the people who are walk-ups. So it's a little bit of both, but yes, I do tend to schedule as much as possible around my showcases. And then, always an opportunity to have a little tea or something to eat is really helpful as well. So scheduling meetings over meals is also important.
So I'll jump in at the presenter end. I really focus on setting meetings in advance of things that I know I need to book. So I try not to schedule meetings as exploratory, 3 to 5 years down the road in advance. I really, it's like get those big stones in the glass first. So that's where I focus. And oftentimes, I mean, by the time you've been a presenter that's connected to the field for a certain number of years, you often will get reached out to by agents, and they know your work, just all the things that Bobby and James were talking about. Like, they know what kind of acts you're looking for. They'll reach out and actually pitch you specific artists, which is wonderful. So I do leave room though. I don't book my whole day. I do intentionally leave room for the walk around, because I think there's real value in that, and in being open to connecting with people that I haven't seen before. I also really try to have like, meeting time, see show time, professional develop / networking time. Like, it's important to me to do all of those things that APAP offers every year, and not just go and try to have meetings every day from morning till evening, not just go and only see shows and not have meetings. So I'm really intentional about trying to kind of split my time pretty equally among those three buckets in advance, and then a little flex to be able to let some magic in.
I would say, so this past APAP in 2023 was my first in this role, and I had way too many meetings, but I felt like I needed to meet with everybody that I could meet with. And of course, then I got sick, and then I couldn't meet with anybody. So I think for me, what I'm looking for this year is much more balance. I need to see work. I need to see what people are doing. And I'm, especially with jazz and Jazz Fest, and trying to see as much as I can in that realm, because a lot of our classical work is pretty much locked down around the time of APAP. So for me, I want to shift my focus and really look at other work that I'm trying to nab for the 24-25 season. So I'm hoping that this year I can achieve better balance with meetings, like what Shelley was saying, meetings and some professional development. I do my best to carve it out in my calendar, and then everyone just keeps asking for meetings, and I keep wanting to say yes. So this year will be easier to just say, we can do this over Zoom after, or a phone call. Because that's, now that I've met folks, it feels like it's an easier way to push it to the future.
I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit, if the panel could speak a little bit to sort of conversation etiquette about how you, either in the expo hall or, in the lobby meetings and the meeting area that's I think it's on the third floor. How do you manage that? And what are some best practices as it relates to meeting?
I'm sorry, Bobby, can you repeat the question? I was looking at the chat. I apologize.
Yeah, it's just about meeting etiquette. If you go by a booth and someone's obviously in a presenter meeting, or how does that work?
Yeah,
if you've never seen that.
If you're a member of NAPAMA, we actually have a sort of a code of ethics kind of thing. You're not supposed to interrupt people if they're talking, in a booth, and really even in the lobby too. I mean, you sort of stand there, maybe wait your turn, wait for a break or a moment in the lobby, and definitely not in a booth. It's not okay to walk up and, try to give a presenter your card or anything if they're already in a booth talking to someone else. It's just not cool, and it happens, and it's not, and then also you're not supposed to wear costumes and parade around the exhibit hall, and and kind of do shows as a part of your exhibiting in your booth and things like that. That's more for APAP to monitor than you, but that's just for us to all know that really it's not okay to do that in the hall. It's tempting. It's hard. You have to even after, as a veteran, I have to remind myself too. But it's just really not. It's not done. You're not supposed to interrupt people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to go along with that, also during showcases, because there's so many different showcasing rooms, it's very tempting to try to pull someone from one room into another. I would just be very respectful, because all of the artists are paying a lot of money to showcase. So there's certainly a lot of attendees to go around. So there's no reason to have to poach, and to remember that this is a very incestuous market and industry that I know many of us have maybe jumped from presenter to artist, or from presenter to producer. So you never know what someone will become down the line, or what organization they're going to be with. So it's really important to have grace, not only for yourself, but for your other colleagues that are attending conference.
I think that it was Nicole that just said something about a follow-up, asking people to meet after the conference. And so that's a great tool. I mean, it's great to have APAP and we want to make the most use of it. And also you're not gonna meet with everyone. It's just not gonna happen. So, when I run into people that I want to connect with, I ask them, gosh, I'm sorry I didn't get a meeting with you in advance. Do you have time in your schedule this week to connect with me? And then I give them, room to respond rather than say, hey, do you have 5 minutes right now? Because that can really throw you off if you have your whole day mapped out. And then if that's not a possibility, I'll follow up with you. Or can I get your card? Someone just said, put your business cards in your,
Yeah.
or if you have like a QR card or whatever, those things. As it's okay for the FaceTime to just be a quick connect and the actual conversation to happen after APAP is over. That can be just as valuable. It's as long as there's been a connection in the moment.
Absolutely. And even a wave or eye contact or hello, it does mean something. It does mean something. I find people are very gracious, and that sometimes that might be all you get, but it does mean something. And I also find that our colleagues, I know I try to do this, if I am talking to a presenter and there's somebody that's next to me and who's new or whatever, and they might want to meet that person, then when I'm finished with my conversation, I will introduce that person to the presenter I'm talking to. It's not that deep, but you just have, if you just stand there for a few minutes, then I think that can be done. Not everybody's like that necessarily. It can be a little competitive sometimes, but I do find that if you see me, I will definitely do that. I'll be around. I think that's another way that you can find that people will get introduced to people.
We have a good question
Thanks.
from the chat. Bob, sorry, jump in, Bobby. For a presenter that what tends to be more cost effective or more effective or cost efficient, a short, well-designed video or a live presentation? Any feelings on that?
Both.
Agree. No, both is great. Live performance is great to just get that feel for what it will feel like in a space and how the audience responds. But a great little video is also super helpful.
Another question from the chat, Eric asks, this is a good one. What's the level of expectation when meeting with a booking agent producer that you'll be able to book in the moment, quote, or set a hold on the date and being able to confirm shows and offers within a week after the conference? First thing I'll say is, Eric, if you're confirming all your shows within a week after the conference, you're doing way better than I ever have. But yeah, go ahead, panelists.
I've been 30 years. I don't think that's ever happened for me. Please go ahead.
No, I was going to say the same things. Likely, if I am closing up a conversation, it's a conversation that started at the fall regionals that we've been talking about it throughout the fall, and we're meeting at APAP and we're both like buttoning it up. But most of the time, some of these conversations can go on for months. It is a long game. So if this is your first conference, go easy on yourself. Know that you're not going to come out of it immediately. Try to build those relationships, build meaningful connections, and know that it takes 2 to 3 years. Sometimes there are some venues that only have a small number of slots that they can fill, and they might see something from the year prior that they've really been wanting to bring in, couldn't find a time until now. So remember, it's the long game. Go easy on yourself, give yourself some grace, and just know that not everything's immediate, and it could be 2 to 3 years before you're starting to see some of this build. It is an investment to come to this market and to come to this conference.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nicole, you book everything on the spot, don't you? For the whole season?
You nailed it. That's what all happens in the moment. It's not stressful at all. A
little different than Amy.
engagement. Oh gosh,
my recommendation,
never.
Eric, just hold a lot of dates and then go back home and turn your phone off for about 2 weeks and then see how many messages you have when you turn it back on.
No, but I
Sounds
think from a practical advice too, just if you are going to put a hold or have an agent pencil something in, it needs to be real. Like, it needs to be a real possibility. I mean, the number of times that part of the shuffle is that you get home and you're wrapping things up within the month or so after APAP, and there's 14 holds on things that aren't real and fall out and then fall in and fall out and fall in. So, if you're really looking, it's okay to say, and I think we'll talk about this in a second. It's okay to say, maybe, but I need to look at a few things, but I'm interested, but I don't know. That's perfectly cool and better than being like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then 2 months later, you can't.
Yeah, I wouldn't issue a hold without actually knowing that the date works and that we're interested in the show and that we're going to agree. But my fear is more just, okay, sign a contract while you're right here in front of me, because I've heard that from some people, but I want to make sure it's not the what's actually happening. So that sounds good.
Only to
Let's
default.
say no is a second favorite answer. So, if you get back and you decide it's not going to work or the budgeting is not there, please tell that agent no. So they're not spending their time constantly checking in on you or being annoying if you know that if you already know that it's not going to work out. Just let them know so they can be very make their time more useful and reach out to people that are very interested or able to bring something in.
And I shouldn't say, I mean, there might have been once or twice where there was a presenter, and often it's because the presenters had something else that fell out before they got to APAP, and they'll come to you and say, oh yeah, I got this, date, and if you guys are free, and so things like that can happen on occasion. But for the most part, it's pretty rare, I think.
We're going to hear from our panelists a little bit at the end as well. We're going to have a little bit more advice, but if there's one last question before we go into the next section, anybody wants to put in the chat? All right. We're right on time. We want to go through very quickly how you do your work after the conference. So as we've talked about here, you're going to be having conversations before the conference, sometimes at the regionals, and then those conversations may accelerate at APAP. So what you have is both on the booking side, the agents are building tours in many cases. So they have a bunch of sort of nebulous dates out there. And then on the presenter side, you may have a bunch of nebulous dates and opportunities out there. And all that sort of crystallizes often in the 6 to 8 weeks after APAP, if you're on a traditional booking cycle, if you're part of a summer festival, other places. But in many cases, the fall to spring booking cycle for presenters sort of crystallizes in that time frame. So it's going to be an important time if you're holding a bunch of dates with a bunch of artists. They may be asking you questions about those dates and wanting to get clarity, and the same on your side. So one of the things that's important is to really be clear about what date you're holding and whether you've built in travel time or time for engagement, workshops, master classes, anything else that you might be doing in addition to the performance. We talked a little bit last week about engagement and what that means for the artists, doing offstage work. If you want to have a visit in a local school or a artist conversation, I think it's very important to start building that, building the capacity for that into the engagement from the beginning. Because if you say, I want the artists to do a performance, but also 5 engagement events, and they're going to fly in the morning of the show, then you might be sort of paying yourself into a box. So building that in early on, where the capacity for it is going to be important, because you want to have the space in the calendar and also make sure that the fee and the accommodations and all those things match the number of things that you're going to want to do. It doesn't have to be specific, and it doesn't have to be exactly this at this exact time, but you can say, artist arrives this day, artist departs this day. Here are the things we're going to do within that space. And obviously the performance time needs to be specific. So think about that early and often. And, particularly for university-based presenters, that time after APAP was a time to say to our community, here's the number of artists that we're generally planning to book. Let's start building the engagement that we want these artists, anything we want these artists to do off stage around that. It's the time to make sure that the technical requirements of the artist's work fits into the context that you have. So getting up-to-date technical writers upon which the offer will be based, and getting them reviewed by the technical professional in your organization is very important at this time too. You don't want to realize in the weeks leading up to the performance that your stage isn't wide enough for the dance company that you have scheduled. So making sure that those tech requirements are reviewed is an important thing that happens, in the preparation for APAP and then leading up to it. So think about that. Think about hotel, ground transportation, all those things that we covered last week. We do have a draft offer letter that we can maybe put a link to in the chat or show you so you can see what that looks like as well. So now we get to talk about money. We are still in an industry that is based on finances, and we want artists to get paid equitably. We, on the presenter side, we're raising funds, we're looking at the budgets, we're getting state and local and private funding to bring these artists together. So how does that fee negotiation work, and what does it look like? It's a big topic we're not going to finish covering here today, but I will say a few things about it, and we can talk a little bit more about it. The first thing I'll say is that in the vast majority of our business, the booking agents, the artists, and the presenters are all acting in good faith to get artists compensated to the best they can. They are working to ensure that within the context of all artists getting paid as best they can, that they have the funding to present and market and engage a season or a series of presentations in their community that they can afford, that presents a wide array in many cases of genres and other things, and within the context of often paying for staff salaries and venue rental and technical things and all those things. So I would say that the most important part of any fee negotiation is just a little bit of grace, and to understand that when a booking agent comes back to you with a price for an artist that and it's higher than what you can afford, they are more than likely not building a new wing on their mansion with that money. They're working to ensure that the artist gets compensated at the highest level they should be compensated at, and that they can make a living wage both as a booking agent and as an artist. On the presenter side, when a presenter offers maybe less than you've quoted, or if they open with an offer that is less than what you think, they're probably not saving that money and going on a ski trip. They're going to probably more than likely use that money to compensate their employees fairly, to present another artist that is also going to be an important contribution to their community in that season as well. So it's really all about hard costs, making sure that those hard costs are covered, and approaching those fee negotiations with integrity. The booking agents and managers are an extraordinarily important part of that negotiation, because they can look at a tour, they can look at an artist's career, they can look at the artist's expenses and build a fee that is compensating the artists equitably within the context of the other presenters that may be presenting the same performance, et cetera. So that's the way that I think about it. The other thing I would say is that I try to get as much detail onto the offer sheet as I can without it exceeding one page. You don't need all of the fine print of your contract in your offer sheet, but you do need to know, for example, how many room nights that you can, who will be paying for the ground transportation and hospitality and travel, and all of that information, and the scope of it, the scope of the engagement, including all of the ancillary events, the meet and greets, if you're penciling that in, or the engagement events, or the early morning school shows. I try to get all of that in to the initial offer letter, and I try to have the fee conversations verbally with the booking agent before the offer letter goes in. In some cases, in the commercial world, which is more on entertainment, oftentimes you'll do a mutually agreeable date offer, which is like, we're offering this much money for this artist and we'll determine the date later. But typically in the performing arts side of our world, you're determining that fee and coming to an understanding of it in that good faith environment before you're sending the offer letter. And then the formal offer letter is the formal offering of that fee for that engagement that is then accepted and begins the contracting and the marketing and all those things that we do. So think about that. You may have several of those conversations happening. We talked about saying no. And Diane, I think, said this phrase, which is no is the second favorite answer of a booking agent. And it's true. Leaving folks in the ether or not explaining why you can't confirm or how close you are to confirming can be really challenging because they're working with other presenters all across the country. So just be very candid and transparent through those conversations if you can, and that will lead to good relationships that will last a long time in the business.
Bobby, at this point, I think maybe from our chat, perhaps knowing that the fee negotiation and the logistic negotiation is some of the most challenging part for when you're new to the field or new in these roles, I wonder if we want to allow the panel just a couple of minutes to give maybe either helpful hints or respond to the way. Nicole, you may be exempt from this conversation because you just signed the forms at your meetings at APAP. We get that. But for those of us more traditional who work more traditionally, perhaps there's some helpful hints or things that you found insightful in when you're talking cash.
Definitely planning for any incidents, like for traveling in. Flights have been, there are flight cancellations, there could be weather cancellations. So depending, I know we talked about if there's like a school show or an evening show, getting in the day before. If you're requiring multiple nights of hotel room, go ahead and stress that to the tech writer, everything in the tech. If there are essential items that you cannot negotiate or that you can negotiate on the tech writer, that's important to know, because maybe that a presenter is like just off the mark of being able to pay the fee. So if there's something in the tech writer that can be compromised, or if the artist is bringing their own backline, that's important to know for presenters too, because that can offset some of the fee to bring in the show. So being upfront and transparent about all needs before the offer letter is written, so that helps to draft that contract and minimize that back and forth between the offer and contracting process is really, really key, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just on the presenter end of things, I agree that it's very difficult I would never offer a fee without getting a rider to know what the entirety of the cost is, because it's one budget typically that we're working with. It's not broken up. And so that's really critical information. I also try to do some homework if it's an artist I haven't booked before. I will ask presenters that I know that maybe have booked the artist, what's been your experience? Do you have a fee range? Some presenters are uncomfortable, or artists, with, nailing a specific number down because there are lots of variables, but it's okay to ask for a range. And I might ask for a range too if I'm talking to an artist I haven't worked with before. Like, what's your typical range for this kind of engagement? Do you have a rider that I could see? Just to kind of start the conversation. Or even I might offer, here's the range that we typically pay for an hour-long concert in this kind of a venue for this many people, just to kind of give people a ballpark. It offers some room for negotiation, but it still lets you know if it's worth it to keep chatting or not, so you can get to that yes or no faster.
Another important part is deposit. If you're going to require a deposit or you need upfront money to get to the gig, that's important to find out, because every presenter is a little bit different, especially university packs. There's some red tape around deposits where they're not paying until the day of, or sometimes even afterwards. So understanding those payment processes and what the capabilities are and what your needs are very important to know, and have those conversations up front, because you don't want to issue the contract not having discussed that, and then the artist is needing money up front and that wasn't discussed, and that's not in the purview of the presenter. That can create problems and fires down the line. So understanding deposits on both sides is really important going into the contract too.
Yeah, I put this in the chat, but I mean we also do our own letter of intent, just because, you know, that makes sure that I'm putting on paper what, you know, things from my perspective. And so, you know, you don't necessarily always have to do both, but I think it's important for you to have your own so that if the presenter's offer comes in and you're like, oh, what, guess what? This isn't covered. And there are two things that I think are really important that are kind of post-COVID. One is streaming, whether or not what you're talking about includes streaming rights or not. Is very important, and that needs to be in your offer letter or your letter of intent. And I would suggest you just say no, it's not in there, and then can negotiate that later. But that's me. And any kind of force majeure COVID policy. I mean, and that's a little tricky in terms of getting that all into your offer letter. But, you know, as we all know, I think we're having yet another round of this darn situation. And it's not bad just to sort of at least have an upfront conversation about what your force majeure COVID policy is, so that you don't find that buried in a 25-page contract and go, oh man, I can't agree to this because, you know, you guys said, you know, you wouldn't pay us if COVID happens or whatever. And so those are two things that I think are really important that maybe were less so, you know, 3 or 4 years ago than they are now, with our post COVID way that we are, you know, having to do business. So I'm curious, do you guys, for the presenters, are those in your offer letters now? Do you talk about streaming and COVID policies in your offers right up front? Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we got the best of the
include-
best on here. You got to watch out for the rest of those guys. I'm teasing, but yes,
I
those are
just tell everyone when I make the deals right there.
Yeah.
No, I would, as a presenter, I try to outline sort of the key, like when I was at Spoleto, and I'm developing a clearer deal memo here in my celebrity series, but we would include even sort of insurance requirements, because that would often sometimes trip some artists up. And so then it became part of the conversation. But also, as Shelley said, when it came to fees, I would usually ask for a range just to like have a starting point to look to see if it falls within what we are thinking budgetarily. And a writer. I work in 9 to 10 different venues around Boston, and every venue has its own special needs and quirks. And so for me, having the writer is very, very helpful to guide those conversations, to know if, you know, if you're going to be at Symphony Hall and you need 6 hours of rehearsal and it's on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, that's not going to happen, because BSO is rehearsing that day. So it's just, and then make that part of the conversation as you're negotiating and being really upfront, so there are no surprises after things are confirmed.
Yeah. I would also say if a presenter is not quite at your fee but close, that merch negotiations are important, and also to understand if a presenter has a fee to sell merch, or if needing to provide a staff member to sell merch, there are some costs or there are some tax requirements at some venues. So merch is another great way to kind of come up in the negotiation process as well.
Yeah, the other states with taxes, I think Connecticut. We love you, Shelley, but we hate that Connecticut tax. Massachusetts, Nicole.
Massachusetts too. I know.
We
Even
love
South
you too.
Carolina.
South
Carolina
I don't know.
has it too.
We don't have one here too. Oh, maybe we do. I don't know.
South Carolina does. It's the same as
California,
Massachusetts.
so you know, just kind of knowing that and considering that as a part of your fee structure as well, you know, because some of those can get kind of pricey. I mean, we you can apply for the waiver and try to get, you know, get it knocked down a little bit, and we've been pretty successful with that, but it's still, even at $800,000 is, you know, a bit of an ouch sometimes. And the other thing I would say is make sure you are prepared to talk about your fees, artists, when you guys go, because they might forget your name. They may forget how many instruments you need, but they will remember how much money you talked about. So you can't go backwards once you quote that fee. It really is hard. So, you know, yes, a range is great. You know, if you have a fee and you really, you know, just try to remember that you know, that is, you know, it's a conversation, but that people write it down, they remember, and that you really can't change it afterwards. So you have to make sure you're, you know, unless you're increasing it or you're adding stuff or whatever. So try to be as confident as you can in your pricing before you get there.
Just want to highlight really quickly something that hi Krista Bradley's joined us, put it in the chat. APAP advocates that presenters make deposits or first payments because touring artists and agents have fees that they incur to prep for getting to your venue. So deposits and compensation of artists generally is a ongoing conversation in our business after COVID, because it became clear that the traditional way of just paying artists for the engagement that they're doing at a venue is when something like COVID happens, can make things very unsustainable. So it's an important ongoing conversation about that, but APAP's definitely advocating for deposits to be a part of your agreement.
So, Bobby, it looks like we have about 15 minutes left of our time today, which is just a good time to review some practical advice, some hints and best practices as you prepare for your conference experience. One of the things that we've touched upon, but we haven't gone into too much detail about, is what Bobby and I like to call drinking from the fire hose, which is the email onslaught that will begin most likely relatively shortly. So, Bobby, any helpful hints, practical advice from you or the rest of the panel about how you handle email and planning as you approach conference?
Sure. I'll start. Just say that I have never successfully replied even to all the individual reach outs that I get in advance of APAP. It is an extraordinary volume of stuff, depending on where you are and what type of presenter or organization you're working for, can be a very large volume of stuff. So I think you have to be able to prioritize. I think you have to be open to new things, but focused on what you know you need, and look through it. So you'll get emails that are just addressed to presenter, because APAP, as they should, shares the contact info, unless you ask them not to, of all the presenters who are going to the conference, and then the agents and who are booking agents who are registering for the conference get that list. So you'll receive a bunch of emails. You learn to scan through very quickly, see if there's anything that you think might be of interest, and either let that go or reply. And then from there, looking at a smaller circle, you'll be thinking about the folks that you've built relationships with over the years, and really just making sure that Shelley's great phrase of putting the big rocks in first, the conversations you absolutely know you have to have, are really important to get on the schedule first. So really prioritize, like, I know we want to present this artist, I have to see this showcase, and I know I want to have a conversation with this person because we have important work to do around this artist. So put the big rocks in first is the most important thing, I'd say.
Well, from a practical standpoint, in my Outlook, because I still use Outlook, or in whatever email system, I have a folder that's called APAP will be called APAP 2024. I either have my system filter for me, or I manually put everything into that folder as it comes in, and then I spend, time each week going through that folder. I have made the mistake of doing it all in December, which is overwhelming, but I try and do it each week. I spend 30 minutes a week really figuring out what my big rocks are so I can put them in first, and then filtering into a subfolder that says not at this time, so that the things in that folder remain current. I developed a system that makes me feel like I'm accomplishing things. And so that whatever system you use, having a system so that you know what you've replied to, what you haven't replied to, what's still pending, is important just to kind of manage the onslaught. Question for the panelists from chat on advice when someone has reached out to you for a project or an engagement and have asked you to reply back, and you've done that a couple of times and they still haven't, and they don't respond back to you. Is there a best practice at when to continue the engagement you found, or when to continue the conversation, or when it's time to say, no, thank you? Our chat person has stumped our panel a little bit.
So are we talking about being ghosted by somebody, essentially?
Professional ghosting.
That's the term.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think professional ghosting is right.
It happens a lot, so it does happen. that's where no is the second favorite answer comes from. I usually keep trying until I feel like it's not viable anymore, and then I'll stop. And if they're very interested, they will come back around. And sometimes people get slammed and then they remember, and you'll hear from them like months down the road. And then it's like a last minute thing and you have to put everything together super fast. But yes, professional ghosting, it does happen every year.
Yeah, I do find that people, it takes a while for them to get back to you. And sometimes it can be, like right before you get on the plane, you finally get that confirmation. I think the other thing that you can do is just offer a couple of options. I know that APAP is busy. So if you can't meet me then, would you be willing to talk about this project, in a few months or down the line? So that way, if you offer a couple of ways for them to connect and times for them to connect back with you, especially if you know that it's not a current conversation. Now, if it's something that somebody's really interested and they express interest in your project and they just I think that's different. You might want to keep being a little bit more keep pursuing. But if you're new and you're just trying to get someone's attention for the first time, I think just offering some possibilities for down the road would be great. And then then they a lot of times they will say, yeah, reach out to me in 2 weeks or a month after APAP's over. And then you have that, and then you can sort of, if you see the person, you wave, you say hello, you give them your business card, and you keep it moving. That's a good thing. That's a good policy, I think.
As a presenter, I like, oh, sorry,
No,
Shelley.
you go, Nicole.
I was just going to say, I like Pam's recommendation. It's a deluge of emails, and on top of all the other work that you have to do on not just responding to emails, but sitting in meetings and strategic planning and lots of other sort of organizational activities. I call it the tyranny of the email. Sometimes it's just, it helps if it just feels like you're not getting a response. It's not because necessarily you're not interested. And if there is somebody who emails me repeatedly where I don't see an alignment with the roster that they represent and the programming that the series' mission, I will let them know that there isn't an alignment and that maybe in the future we could talk, but at the moment, because I do think that's helpful sometimes. And but yeah, I think circling back, if it's something that interest has been expressed and I just have not gotten to you, it's not for lack of interest, but lack of time, probably.
I have a quick key on my Google Gmail that says something very polite about, I don't have any opportunities at the moment, but I'll keep your materials and be in touch about anything in the future. Mm-hmm. And so I just have to kind of hit one button to say that. And that sounds a little over formulaic perhaps, but when you're deling with the volume, I've used that in the past. And
that's helpful, Bobby.
It's the right thing for the folks that because they can move on and put their energies toward folks that maybe closer alignment. A couple of we're running out of time a little bit.
That and say it a little slower.
Sure, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it says something like, "Thanks for sending. I don't have any opportunities for this project at the moment, but we'll keep your material in case of anything in the future and be in touch if anything comes up." It's just a very polite way to say, not at this time. A couple of quick things. The first thing we want to do, if you are coming to the conference for the first time, the APAP provides a new colleagues convening and mentorship program. It happens, I believe, on the first day. It's on the Friday of the conference. It's incredibly important and incredibly valuable if it's your first time to go to APAP to sign up for that session, to sign up to get a mentor and reach out to the person who APAP assigns as a mentor. I've been a mentor now for about the past 5 to 7 years, and some of the connections I made with new colleagues in that process stay with me today. I'm in touch with those folks regularly because we, sort of built that rapport early on in their time at APAP, and I was able to sort of give them a little bit of guidance to help. So join that session if you can. Take advantage of the professional development that is available there. Be in those sessions. It's really important to attend the member meeting, the plenaries and the receptions at APAP, if at all possible. No one's taking attendance at the door, but it's a really important way that we support this incredible organization that organizes our conversations and our industry in the way that it does, and advocacy and all those things. It's where you're going to learn the very state of the arts, the state of the art and the state of the arts as it exists. And also the affinity groups as well are incredibly important to find your community, to engage with the conversations and questions specific to that community, and learn about advocacy opportunities and commune as well. So join those, be a part of those if you can. Have a system for your notebook, your calendar, your transportation, figure it out in advance. And then the last two things we would say is take time to rest. I usually reserve between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. for sleep at APAP, and sometimes I get it. Hydrate, remember to eat, and this is not the time to wear your fanciest shoes that are more for aesthetics than utility. Wear very comfortable footwear would be the last recommendation. Anything else from our panelists as we say goodbye today? Last bits of advice?
Check the weather.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat, but I do find that folks, they get a little weary towards the end, and they're a little less nice and a little less kind. And I used to take it kind of personally until I realized that a lot of them are hungover for one thing. But if they've been out partying, whatever. So just don't take it personally, because if people do, it does start to get, everybody wants to go home and they're tired and they might be getting sick, etc. And the other thing I would say is, like, if you wear reading glasses or, a funky scarf or something, put on something kind of cool, get that, it might attract a little bit of attention and strike up a conversation. Oh, where'd you get that from? That's nice, etc. Then, that also might, so, I got a whole supply. So, just a thought, Mm-hmm.
Excellent. We are out of time. I want to say a tremendous thank you to Krista and Willie and everybody, Association of Performing Arts Professionals. A big thank you to our panelists, Diana, Pam, Shelley, Nicole, and my co-facilitator, James. Please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, and make sure to fill out the survey that is in the chat and that you'll receive in your email. Thanks for joining us today. Willie, do you need to say any closing words?
Thank you all again so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure hearing from our wonderful panel about all these tips on how to have a successful conference. And I want to thank you all again for attending this afternoon. I dropped a link in the chat for a survey to complete after the session. So please take a moment to fill that out. It's incredibly short, and we would greatly appreciate any feedback you have to offer us. So with that, I have nothing else to add. So I hope you all have a wonderful day.